in honor of Indian South Asian Independence Day, I thought we should discuss some history. So I found an old text, not that old, but relative to social media, pretty old, by Dr. David Dr. David Ludden of UPenn. So David Ludden is American, and he did come to our university once to check on the graduate students' general situation, and he wrote a report somewhere that we never read, but it was very nice of him to visit Massachusetts all the way from Pennsylvania. And as you guys know, a huge event happened in Pennsylvania, in rural Pennsylvania, okay? And David Ludden taught from a relatively urban area of Pennsylvania, and it is reflected in his book because sometimes when I read this book, he's writing about agrarian South Asia. He is all over the place. That is just one shortcoming of this book. But before that, let's just jump into the good things about this book. So the good thing is in the title, obviously, that South Asia is agrarian. They do rely on livestock a lot. And in that way, you can see like overlaps between the challenges America faces in 2024 and what India has faced in the past in terms of managing the democracy, the demography, and what people's values are. Because one easy thing is that like agriculture relies on the reproduction of husbandry as well as human husbands to maintain the social order across the board. But South Asia has some particular interesting phenomena that Dr. David Ludden does point out. And we are just covering some of the things I noticed in the territory chapter. So there are like 5 chapters, I think, like broadly organized according to theme, not chronology. So this is not your average linear history. This is like a very like experimental history book. Let's just put it that way, because Dr. David Ludden was collaborating with the University of Cambridge for this endeavor. And as you all know, there were recent UK protests, and I do think it's like an assertion of the people's will, even though I'm a, non-white, like I do not support the supremacy of this race. But let's just put it this way, the way America is going, like one day they might sue the UK over the rights of English. Like recently at UPenn, someone was suing another biotech company for patent rights over COVID vaccine profits. So we are fighting over COVID profits inside America, whereas like, the developing countries, etc., and UK are still like coming back alive from the pandemic, and like the Reagan corporate America is back. Like, let's just put it that way, and they're gonna come for English if the UK doesn't assert itself. So let's just shout out University of Cambridge. Their South Asia Institute is like super well known in the history field. I've never been there, but I do wish to visit one day as like a fan, not as a scholar anymore. But I just wanted to point out like one major typo was the king of Jammu and Kashmir, the Hindu king prior to Islam, was Lalita Aditya. Okay, he misspelled it. Nobody caught that, and it's like he is so famous because he is quoted saying that it is better to keep farmers in the Jammu and Kashmir area poor because then they will not revolt. So I think it does have some resonation within the contemporary Jammu and Kashmir society. But for our purposes, I just wanted to point out that there is a typo. Okay, now let's get into the more serious issues. Like, Brahmins started South Asian history according to Dr. David Ludden, okay? Like, there's this weird like circular logic where there's no text, then there's no culture. If there's no culture, then there's no text. And by text, he really narrowly defines it as like things he understands. So he started studying Tamil, right? He started as a Tamil historian, and then he was using that to read of all North India, and it's like, how are songs not texts? How are fashion, art, these types of things not texts? And then he also has like this thing where he says like, if there's no inscription, then it's like not authorized by a king. So he's trying to explore like politics in connection with agrarianism. And it's like, well, a graffiti is also an inscription by English definition, but we understand what he means is like an inscription in a very like stately manner, like the way the three-headed lions are on like Indian money. Like that's his idea of like culture. So yeah, like in 2024, across the board, people are fighting over this issue, and we are going to see a reprint of this book one day, I think. I have a feeling, because you know what happened? UPenn just got millions of dollars to study climate by this capitalist venture capitalist who makes their money mostly from Asia. So he's connected with like the Hong Kong finance and the Dubai finance. And then now he's giving it all to UPenn. I don't know how that happened, but if they're gonna use this textbook, we need to be a little bit vigilant, because it's a little bit like pro-Brahmin / pro like text. Like he defines text as like this type of text, you know, and that's a narrow definition of text. Okay. So he is also using the idea of Sanskritization back. Dr. M.N. Srinivas started the idea of Sanskritization based on colonial and post-colonial, so like post-1800s observations. He was not talking about medieval times, which is what the chapter territory is mostly covering. It is not, Dr. M.N. Srinivas is not saying Sanskritization is a age-long, like millennia phenomenon. He is very narrowly focused on when sociology became a thing, and saying that, you know, we are also humans, even though colonialism happened. You know, that's the core message of Dr. M.N. Srinivas. However, Dr. David Ludden is not paying attention to that. He's just saying, oh yeah, since Sanskrit was invented, people have been Sanskritizing themselves. And it's like, how is that even possible? How is that even, anyways. But yeah, it is great that Sanskrit survived all these ages of like turmoil, and I love Sanskrit. I have friends who use it for their work. But on the other hand, like, just because people adopt caste names or caste affiliations, like, I don't know if you can call that Sanskritization, because the other thing is that, you know, races have evolved over time. You cannot just say because white people are behaving like this during the UK riots, white people have always been this way since time in memorandum. Memorandum? I don't know that word. Because somewhere there is a bit of ecological determinism, like because the land is dry, so people behave that way in this book, which is arguably like understandable to some extent. Like for an American to understand South Asia, you do kind of need those types of logical jumps. But he has a very obvious problem where he's like, Tamils have always been migratory. It's in this section. I don't know the page number. I didn't do like a very detailed thing, but like Dr. Sunil Amrit wrote the book Crossing the Bay of Bengal to say, no, like, you know, the colonial money economy had a lot to do with the new labor migrations in this area. So like there's like a tension of like nature versus nurture, where Dr. Sunil Amrit is like, obviously political domination of the West had to do with why we were migrating as a people, as a Tamil people. But like this book by Dr. David Ludden is a bit more like, oh yeah, like they didn't mind moving around. They had 20% of people who were warriors. And it's like, how did you get that number? Anyways, I think some people are really proud that 20% of their people have been warriors, but then like when it comes to this, like, you get a bit worked up. One gets a bit worked up when, someone based from a very an unequal society such as Pennsylvania, United States, is saying things like this about South Asia. It's like, look over there, people are looting. And it's like, something happened really significant in Pennsylvania and nobody's talking about it in terms of their socioeconomic dynamics either. Anyways, except me. I'm your host, Adrian. Okay, and the third final point is that Tantra, he seems to be making it look like a weaker force in South Asian society. It's like, oh, tantric practitioners are like, please let us in. Please let us into the fold of Hinduism. We really want to enter Hinduism. And it's like, no, Tantra was very powerful. Like Mr. Rajarshi Nandi has pointed out, like, Kamakya Devi, Jai Ma Kamakya, Joy Ma Kamakya, has been active for 3,000 years. And we have people from Andhra Pradesh wearing all gold, dripped in gold, visiting the Kamakya temple in 2023, 2024. It's not like tantrics needed Vedas, like this book. That's one of my like issues with this book, is like the Tantra practitioners seemed like outsiders to a Vedic South Asia. And it's like, you literally questioned the whole Indo-Aryan argument put forth by a lot of like chauvinists, and now you're doubling it back down. It's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Okay, there's a cool program in Hindi if you guys are interested to know like how people are trying to understand this period of history without the lens of chauvinism, by Baramasa. They are based in Uttarakhand, and they have an episode. I love their content. They have an episode saying Bon, which is associated with the Tibetan plateau. Bon people arrived and practiced Bon in Uttarakhand prior to the Brahmins who came. And then it's like, Dr. David Ludden's book doesn't really allow space for those kinds of phenomena. He's just like, oh yeah, the whole region, the women, they just do whatever they want. So we're just focusing on patriarchy right now. Like, that's just this book. Anyways, thank you guys for listening, and check out this book and support University of Cambridge. And you may or may not want to join Ivy League depending on your socioeconomic status, but they are a strong force in American, elite. So let's just put it that way. Anyways, Jai Hind, happy Independence Day, and take care.